we've already introduced ourselves. There is another member of the team, Josh, who is currently on annual leave, so he gets a nice big X through his face. But yeah, it's something we've been running together because we started it together. We kind of stumbled onto it in a weird sort of sense. So a bit of a weird one, to be honest. Now, I said this started as dubious copyright infringement. Basically, it was inspired by Cards Against Humanity. We were trying to think of a activity for an offer holder day that our students or applicants could come in and do to get them involved in the course in some way. And we thought a really good idea for that would to be base it off a game that exists already. So we started with Cards Against Esports, and this is the dubious copyright infringement. Interestingly, from this point, we've actually got in touch with Cards Against Humanity, and they said, please stop using all of our logos and stuff like that, and entirely redesign your idea. So it's now blatant copyright infringement rather than dubious. But there you go. That's where the inspiration is, and to be fair, they were pretty helpful when we reached out to them before they told us to stop using everything. So there you go. The original method as it started was, like I said, for offer holders days. We've since used it in modules and in development of our course as well. So we'll get to that in a second. But this is how it ran originally. So when the students came in, they'd group up normally. You can do it individually, but it doesn't work as well for what we found. They have 3 categories. So for the original use, it was a game, a location, and a sponsor. Being on the esports course, those are things that you'd need to consider for any esports event. And then they have to link all 3 together in one event. The fun part about it, and where it gets a bit weird, is these don't all link together necessarily. So an example of the cards that we had were Pampers nappies. The locations were like a cathedral or a circus or something like that. And then the game would be like Tiger Woods PGA Tour 2004 golf. So it doesn't always make sense, and it isn't always feasible for an actual event, but that's part of it because they're going to put those ideas together. They're going to have fun. They're going to not worry about morals, which is something that gets a lot of interesting ideas. I'll put it that way. But yeah, they link them all together and then they pitch it to the group. Sometimes, being in the esports competition business, we make them vote for the best one, but that doesn't always go down very well. You have to kind of read the room in that situation and see which one works. So there you go. Now.
Yes, so depending on what you want to get out of your activity, these are 3 key points that we like to talk about. The creativity aspect of it, as Phil said, there are very bizarre scenarios that students come up with, and you can really foster that creativity by giving them these limitations that they have to think the most outside of the box idea available to them to come up with a solution to the scenario. And you'll hopefully see that when you go to do these tasks that you're thinking about your own stuff in very different ways to what you would normally do. Aspirational, it's about giving people that goal. Can they actually figure out how to run these things? They've come up with these solutions, in our case, to the event ideas. We can then break down after that, go, well, can you actually provide reasoning behind this? They'll provide their problem-solving solutions. How can they actually get around to building them and set themselves goals? Can they run them? Can they achieve these aspects? Even if that aspiration is just find the solution in the first place, how would we run it rather than going anything further?
Yeah, so since that original offer holder day idea, we've developed it into what it is now and what you're going to be doing in just a second. Like Ross said, there's 3 different ideas, and we kind of run off the principle of the donkey, the stallion, and the unicorn. That's good. So the creativity one, there's still 3 categories, but it's all entirely random, much like the first one. The first one that we did is the perfect creativity one, really. It's very unrealistic. There's absolutely no boundaries. You can send people to the moon. You can attack people with weapons. You can do whatever you want. And the idea is you find the unicorn. So you find the perfect balls to the wall, incredible event that people would love to be at, or maybe hate to be at, depending on what you do. But it's the best thing that you can come up with. The aspirational side of things is a bit different. So you restrict the amount of cards, or you restrict the amount of limitations. You still give them some freedom, so they can maybe pick the other cards. And it's a bit more realistic. So they have to find the stallion or the best resolution for the situation they've been put in. Still have to think creatively, still have to think about how can I make this incredible. But it's just a bit more realistic. It's a bit more based in reality. And then we've got the donkey at the end. So the problem solving one, you give them a situation that has existing problems, existing boundaries within it, and they have to find what's going to work in this situation, what's going to have the best outcome given it's not a perfect situation. So what we're going to do with you guys today is aCARDemics. Basically, we're going to give you an opportunity to do it and then see what you think. I have no idea what's going on with that. Sorry. Group up. Seeing as Sean and Cam are here by themselves, you guys can make friends. But on the table in front of you, do you want to explain?
Yeah, I was just saying, if one of you guys wants to join up with Jody, and then if you, I'll also provide a bunch of cards for anyone that's online, if there is anyone. Do we know if anyone's online? One person online, maybe. If that's the case, I can give you a set of cards to use for them as well. But you'll notice in front of you is some wonderful cards to use. If you guys want to pick either set of cards to work with, take a business card each. I have loads of those. I just printed out nice business cards. And some pieces of paper. Those pieces of paper, all they've got is a section of learning strategies in front of you that you will find on your cards, just in case you don't know the specific method that is being suggested to you. But all we're going to do is flip over your cards. You have been given 3 random cards. One assessment method, how we're going to actually assess a module that we're going to run. We're going to have a module card, which one of you in your group can figure out which module that is going to be based on the description that's there. If anyone's played Cards Against Humanity, this is like the black cards that have like a question, and then you provide your own answer. So in this scenario, if I have a look at this module, least favorite module on your course. I don't know. What do you teach, Cameron? Yeah. What's the least favorite module on our course? I don't know. I'll use resourcing as an example. No, I love that module anyway, but analytics, yeah. So I can do that. We have our assessment method is how we're actually going to assess people in the end of our for that module itself at the end of the year. And then we have a learning strategy as well. How are we going to teach people through that module to actually get to our end goal? And we'll end up with a bunch of really bizarre scenarios where you might find that you're going to be using lab-based work to do a module that you would normally be teaching very theory-based. Your goal is to try and find a solution that incorporates all of them together. Does that make sense to people? Everyone happy with that?
From the table. We got dream teaching subject, could be hobby, etc. Experiential learning, and then a wiki blog assessment. So off the top of my head, I thought of Yu-Gi-Oh, the card game from back in the day. I like it. Ross is obsessed with it slightly. So we thought, okay, we'll make that a module then. The experiential learning could be going to Yu-Gi-Oh events and running a deck and see how they do in that. And the assessment being a wiki blog, they could write a report on how their cards fared, the kind of draw rates that they got from certain cards and how they change that in the future. And then we thought that would be great, but how do we make that a module on esports? And we thought it could be analytics.
Yeah, so I'm an Excel nerd. I absolutely love Excel. So I decided, how would I do a lecture on Excel to do with this point? There's a thing called the Financial Modeling World Cup, which is Excel esports, where they get everyone on Microsoft Excel and run a tournament. It sounds bizarre. It sounds terrible. It's worth a watch, I promise you. It's definitely my favorite subject. And yeah, so I came up with the idea of we can do that. We can take them to said experience, get them to go do it in person, see what it's like, and they can write a blog about their experience in it. Or if they were watching it, the experiences that they got from other people and how they can benefit from said experience. Bizarre stuff, I know. But now everyone can Google the Financial Modeling World Cup.
If you take one thing away from today. But yeah, that's off the top of our heads, and that's just a brief example of the flexibility that it has in terms of what it can get you to think about and what it can get you to hopefully incorporate that you hadn't thought about before. And that's the whole idea behind it. We're going to talk about. Are we going to talk about? What's happening? Jody? I don't know.
I think it's because we
Okay.
on Teams to try and
maybe, yeah.
It's all good.
So we're going to talk about the theory that we assigned to this after the fact. Like I said, we came up with it almost off the cuff as an offer holder day activity, and it wasn't until much later on that we realized that there's a lot of theories that we didn't think about that are actually involved in this. So this customer engagement cycle is something that I talk about a lot in one of our marketing modules. Essentially talking about the steps that customers go through from the initial engagement with the product, and if that's a positive experience, if the interaction they have is really good, they become satisfied, and then they become retained customers. And if they continue in that cycle, they eventually become advocates. So they speak for the product, and then that makes new engagement and stuff like that. We've taken this quote from CM Sashi. and we've adapted it to this project. So instead of engaged customers, we've got engaged students become partners who collaborate with teachers in the value-adding process to better satisfy their needs, as well as the needs of other students. And we think this is really, really key. We found this with relatively new lecturers, but immediately we saw this happen. As soon as we got students engaged and as soon as we made that step after COVID blended learning, which made it a lot more difficult, as soon as they became engaged, they started performing much better. They started being much more interested and doing more projects and all that kind of stuff. So this activity, in them thinking of the weird ideas and the weird scenarios they get, helps them become more engaged in the topic. So like I said, the other holiday activity we mentioned, we'll talk about that more in a second, but by doing that activity with them, it gets them more engaged in the content, even if it's very, very loosely based on it, because they're just thinking about it, they're having fun with it, they're becoming advocates for it. So this is a really key thing for us, at least for the activity. Ross.
Yes, so we decided to then obviously take a look at the other theories that we worked with, and gamification is a key one. It started out as a game that we transferred into it, but we looked about how exactly this is affecting our student spaces, and when we have them extrinsically, I nearly got there, motivated, back when they're just thinking about it from an aspect of grades and attendance and things like that, they're not really progressing that far. But then when we get into our activity, pushing them and getting them going, we should have some intrinsic motivation. Here we go. We get all of these aspects that they're looking at, which hopefully you guys have had somewhat fun with this one. When we do our student space one and they go crazy with ideas, that tends to be the big fun aspect that draws people into it and gets them going. And it's later on that you can hit them with the, by the way, you learned something now. And that realization is great, which I think is another theory that we have in this slide.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about it, but wonder learning is a big part of this as well. When you get students who are like, yeah, we're going to take our attendees into a big room and give them all paintball guns and make them fight each other. Yes, it sounds a bit weird, but you can bring it back and say, that's a really good experiential learning method. That's a really good experiential marketing technique. So it's that whole, Josh, who we do this with, has a dog called Willow, and Willow hates taking pills, but if you wrap it in meat, she takes the pill. So it's that whole kind of, this is the meat that you wrap it in. Weird analogy, but there you go. We do talk about it. Okay.
Wow. It's like the Willow scenario. So yeah, the key point is just giving them that aspect of, hang on a minute, I thought we were just messing around, and now all of a sudden we get hit with we can actually bring this back into concrete learning here. And you might find that you can do that with your wonderful experience campaign of the marketing for Taylor Swift, for example. People might go, oh, gooey eyes, now I get to work with Taylor Swift. But at the end of it, even if they don't necessarily get the one that they wanted and they don't get picked, they still get to go, look at all of this stuff that I've made that you've been able to teach them throughout, that they can go, well, I have this skill set now and I can take it further. Yeah. These are the key skills that we can, throw upon them. By the way, yeah, you have learned something.
And then there's a couple more as well, the experiential peer learning aspect of it. So experiential learning is students learning through doing. And David Kolb wrote many papers on this topic. It's a really interesting read. It's something I put into this a lot because I think that's a really, really beneficial way to learn. Personally speaking, that's how I learn. So I think bringing that into students as we do is a really good idea. And then peer learning, obviously, you see PALS schemes a lot of the time nowadays, and it's a really beneficial technique. Learners consciously assisting others to learning helps them to learn more effectively themselves. So again, just two ideas that come into this quite a lot, and based on the stuff that you do after it, if you do it with students, can really drive forward their development and engagement, but also within your teams. So the activity we did today is a more curriculum development focused one. And Sean and Cam, even though you didn't know each other before today, you've helped each other learn about each other's areas. So you've hopefully got a better understanding, and you can hopefully, if you were to work together again, take that forward some more. So that's the other aspect of it, is that peer learning, making friends type thing. Which is why it works so well for induction activities as well. Offer holders days, welcome weeks, stuff like that. That's why we use it there.
Just to actually touch that point, I know you're desperate to jump on. We did this task for an offer holder day, and that led to a student remembering us because of that activity and remembering other people that did their offer holder day. So that when they start, they immediately go, ah, yes, there's that thing, which they can then be like, this is that wonderful event that we made, didn't we? And everyone else that's near them's going, I have no idea what's going on, but that sounds great. that there is a level of just once you start being silly, you will find friends, and it is quite nice to help grow things. Yeah. Oh, wow.
That's one of the benefits. So we've picked out 3 main benefits, and what Ross is talking about is the emotional connection. It's you make those connections, you have fun with it, and then that improves your experience when you come back to that situation when you do it again next time. The example that he mentioned, that event is actually happening as well. So the event they came up with at an offer holder's day, they're planning to do next year. So it's a perfect example of the module application. I promise we'll get to it in a second. But yeah, the application of theory and the creativity we kind of talked about throughout. So there you go. Here's the module bit. So once we took this from the offer holders day and then the curriculum development thing, we've also been doing it in one of our modules. Esports Events Experience is a marketing focused module primarily based on experiential marketing and contemporary methods of marketing. The game sponsor venue activity is the one we did in this because we noticed that, just take a seat wherever, it's okay. We noticed that people were struggling to come up with ideas essentially for their events that they had to run or the marketing campaigns they had to go to. So we did the activity with them. Again, very creative, very off the wall ideas and out the box thinking. And we saw a lot of students off the back of that take those ideas forward, refine them slightly, and put those into practice. And it gave them a base to work from to develop their marketing techniques, to develop their strategy, even market research and stuff like that, based on who would attend these weird moon-based activity experiential campaigns. So it works really well to get them thinking creatively. If you have a bunch of students who aren't creative at all, like me, for example, you can do this and you can think, okay, what is the craziest thing you can think of? That's great. Now boil it down slightly and think about what you could do. And in this module, especially because they had to create marketing assets, it worked really well for that because they could think about all these things they'd love to do, like a AR maze inside a venue type thing, and like a secret hidden signs everywhere around the expo hall. And then they could go, okay, well, I could mock that up pretty easily. I could actually put that into action. So again, it works really well for that. And then since then, it's the wider application because I'm hilarious. No, we've used this a lot of different ways, and we've got a few examples here of how different subject areas could do it. So if you had engineering, for example, you could give them a material card, an object card, and a client. So they have to make a certain object out of a certain material for a client that you state. We're not experts in these areas, so if these examples are way off, please forgive us. But art, you give them a style, you give them a subject again, and then a medium that they have to create it in, just to get these different ideas. So you could do, I don't know, a portrait from a Picasso style on a, give me a medium, a light. There you go. You can make like a light art thing. I don't know. Like I said, not experts. Or if there's a politics one, you could give them, they are part of a party, so like the Monster Raving Loony Party. Give them a sector, education, and then a crisis. I'm not going to talk about that because you could be here all day. But you can see the flexibility of it. And having these different ideas makes it really easy to apply to literally any course. I mean, just the ideas you came up with today, I'm sure would work for different courses as well. So it's such an easy way to get people from different areas thinking about their own area and also areas beyond that. Now, do you want to talk about Megan?
Yeah, sure. So this is Dr. Megan, I'm going to butcher the surname, Destequois, is that right? Something like that? There we go. Yes, they are on the teams here who, academic development team, correct? I think that's the name. And they were helping us in redeveloping our esports course. And after we had done this wonderful presentation to them, they then stole our idea, hence the lovely meme that's been designed here. That is them, by the way. They stole our idea and shoved it in our faces for our actual academic development meeting. All right. No one got hurt. Everything is okay. Our academic development meeting, and gave it to us to make us come up with ideas for our own course, which I think some of which have probably ended up actually finding their way into the new degree.
So Megan doing this with us really helped us create a degree that is really engaging and very, very authentically assessed now, using these weird, crazy, wacky ideas. So we've got a podcast as one of our assessments, for example, based off the back of this, which is a really, so it's something that's very different to what we had previously. So it worked really well for that. And we are very thankful to Megan for helping us see it in a wider sense, because before we talked to Megan about it, it was just a offer holder activity that people had fun with. We didn't really think about anything else. Oh no, we didn't really think about anything else before we got to that stage. So it's off the back of that we've started to develop it a bit more, and we've realized really what the potential for it could be. Hopefully we get it back. Phil, hello. So yeah, what we're going to do when the presentation comes back, if it comes back, is we've got a few examples of what our students have created and what they've come up with. And we're going to put them on the board, hopefully, and we're going to see if you can guess what the ideas they had were. Because like I said, they are a bit weird.
When you give esports students freedom of creativity, they are very creative. They also seem to be very violence inclined for some reason. Yeah, that's a minor hint. Don't expect
that
all
what
of
you
them
will
to be just like murder. Don't worry, it's not that bad. We're nearly. We're getting there.
Changing name on not helping me.
Technical difficulties. Oh, looks promising. There we go.
Yay!
So the first example, Pampers, Cathedral, and Tiger Woods PGA Tour. Cam is banned because he knows what it is. So what do you think the idea was that the students came up with when they had the game of a golfing game taking place in a cathedral with Pampers sponsoring it? Okay, yeah. I mean, it wasn't the idea, but
It's an option.
in a very weird way.
It's a terrible pinata. Yeah.
Gross, but it would be unique, right? People would remember it. Exactly, yeah. So interesting idea. The one the students came up with was they create a mini golf set essentially in the cathedral, and there's a wedding taking place as well. And the final course or the final hole of the mini golf is you have to hit it under the bride's dress, and then she's wearing Pampers RGB nappies because it's esports. Because gamers have to have RGB. Yeah, we actually had another one after this that was Fortnite instead of the golf game, and in that one, when you get a victory royale or when you win the game in Fortnite, Jesus comes down and gives you a Pampers nappy grenade in game, and then the skin you play as is Pope Francis. So again, another weird one, but it's the kind of idea that you could have interacting these things. And that one, you've got the in-game skin, which is a really good way for driving revenue and driving engagement in your game. You've got the dedicated weapon, the reward thing, so the payoff in that sense, the neurodivergency marketing or neuromarketing aspect of it. And it's just bringing these ideas together and making them realize that they've thought of this when they haven't actually been thinking about it. So the next example, maybe, could you click? There we go. So it's Nike, it's Valorant, which is a arena shooter, like CSGO, if anyone's heard of that, and it's in a circus. Any guesses for this one?
There was a big sigh, there was a thought process, and then nothing came. Pretty close.
Almost, yeah. So the actual idea for this one was, again, they create items of clothing from the game. So it's all Nike branded stuff. It's a limited line or whatever. You wear it inside a circus, and then you have to play Valorant with paintball guns and stuff like that. And you have to do that, and then they create a map in the game that was a circus tent. So that's a more realistic one. But again, it hits all those ideas. It's very creative. You get to have fun with people. You get to make people do things in a circus tent in Nike clothing. So again, it brings those things into the realm of it. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so
Do you know this
Euro
one?
Truck Simulator 2. If anyone doesn't know, this is a game that is just you are a truck driver in Europe and you get given a job to drive from place A to place B. You follow the road laws exactly like you would, and you just do lots of driving. It sounds, some people are looking at me like it sounds like the most boring thing in the world. This is actually one of the more popular games out there, believe it or not. There's so many people play this. And people will buy massive steering wheel setups and everything to make sure that they've got their best experience for driving a truck. This is a bit more awkward, though. Again, beyond the realms of possibility, I think, because they're inner Weatherspoons, but they're sponsored by Bargain Booze. So a slight conflict of interest. Any takers on the driving game with lots of alcohol as an idea?
in the back of the truck.
A pub attached to the truck.
You're driving these people along like a pub crawl type thing, but it's like more scenic routes.
Yeah, I like it. I think that's way better.
Yeah.
Just like the drive the truck with a bar, and you can do the pedal. You do cycle tours where you do a pub crawl.
Yeah.
This is just the next level up. Where you get a whole
Yeah.
semi. For their scenario, it started off in the realms of chaos, in which they just said, "Yeah, we're going to get everyone drunk," and then they play the game.
Actual idea was they drive trucks around, which is slightly worse.
Which was slightly worse. But after some bring them back into Earth, okay, how can we actually run this in the scenario? They turned it into a whole campaign about drunk driving, in which they gave people different amounts of alcohol and then saw how it affected their experience on them, so that people got the idea of what's it like. You can even, people were suggesting things like, the beer goggles that just blur your vision a bunch, trying to get people to play the game with that and just seeing how much worse they perform because of it. And we ended up going from complete chaos and lots of crime to all of a sudden, here's a campaign to stop people from doing crimes that they would be committing otherwise.
But no, that was a really interesting one. And then the final one, we've got Rocket League, which is essentially football with cars. Top Gear did it once. There's a game of that, basically. The college group that did it was Newcastle and Stafford College's group, which is why I included them in the thing. So they got their own college. And then the location was Silverstone. Any guesses? Pretty much, yeah. So one of the lecturers was in the room when they did this, and they basically targeted him and said, okay, you can drive the college bus around Silverstone playing Rocket League, while we drive the other buses, and then in the game you can, if you hit someone hard enough, they blow up. And I'm like, yeah, we're gonna blow you up. And it was like, okay, but if a college group did that, that would be really cool, wouldn't it? If they went to Silverstone and it was like a inter-college event or something like that, and you ran it as a tournament, that would be really interesting. And chances are you get a lot of publicity out of that. So, sorry? Well, yeah, we'll take the explosions out of it. But it's a good example, this and the Bug and Booze one, of you having to step in as the practitioner and just bring them back to reality a little bit. If you just left this to go on by itself, it would just evolve into chaos. But as the practitioner, you can be there and you can bring it back and you can apply all the theory without them even realizing it. And then at the end of it, you bring it back and say, okay, well, you thought about these areas, you thought about these areas. So how could you develop that further? And how could you write about that? And you get better reactions with that than standing at the front of the room saying, we're going to talk about wonder learning. And then they all turn off immediately. So yeah. And the other part about it, the other fun aspect about it, and the reason why we show these examples off is because it's memorable. We always end the college visits and the offer holders days with, hopefully you had fun here, because if you had fun, you'll remember it. And that comes into the whole, don't worry about laws, don't worry about morals, because if you have these wacky off-the-wall ideas that are crazy and would never happen, again, it would be a unique experience, like the golf poo idea. You're going to remember that, and you're going to think about that when you come back to it. So,
for the case of rememberability, that Pampers example is remembered not just by the group that did it, by people in other years who have heard the stories of this wonderful event.
Yeah.
So it really has this lasting effect if you can give them that level of creativity, and particularly if you guys are doing art stuff. I'm sure you can come up with your brand deal for Taylor Swift, when you guys can go, well, we had Taylor Swift, but they're also being sponsored by Pampers. What do we do? Then you have that level of creativity that people will remember.
Yeah. And that's the benefit of it. That's the key benefit of it, really, to students.